Owen Waters took an idea from another famous author called David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force. And Owen Waters sort of extended the project. And basically what he did was he found a way of calibrating human consciousness. But using kinesiology, which most of you probably know what that is, muscle testing. And through doing that, he was able to determine, you know, how we categorize ourselves as individuals in terms of our spiritual journey. So the calibration scale that he came up with was assigning the numbers of 1 to infinity as a possible range of consciousness. And he found that it just wasn't working. So he had to go for logarithmic numbers because the variation was so huge. People with a really high level of consciousness, it's very much out of proportion to those with less. And this is not, we're not saying that people are better because they're higher consciousness. It's not about that. It's just about how awake you are to the possibilities of what your body and mind can do, really. So it's not a sort of intelligence race or anything like that. But what is concerning is that humanity needs to reach a sort of average level in order for us to move out of the position that we're in at the moment. And it's probably the worst it's been since one of the wars, I would have thought, and probably worse than even the Gulf Wars. We're probably going back to the world wars probably now, in terms of just how restricted we are and how much is going on that's making it difficult for our economy and for many people to work and so on. So let me move on. Hawkins, so remember he was the original one, so Owen Waters has developed this. Hawkins found that a consciousness level of 200 was critical. So this was what he was looking at for humanity to reach as an average for us to move out of the stalemate we were in. And remember, this was written a long time before the whole COVID and lockdown situation. So he felt an average of 200 or more is necessary to sustain life on the planet without it sinking into self-destruction. And he started to notice that people who were above that level of consciousness were making up considerably for the ones below it. And below 200 is a very serious level to be allocated, because it basically means that you're in a position of shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride. They're all very negative states to be stuck in. And at the point where the average gets up to 200, we start to get a kind of planetary courage, if you like, an ability to empower yourself out of victim orientation of the lower frequencies. So that's why that's the important target. Now, the thing is, if you're in a situation where you don't know where your next meal is coming from, or whether you're going to be beaten to death, you know, literally there are people in that situation every day. When they wake up, they don't know if they will make the day out. Then those poor characters could be down as low as 50. And that really is a very, very serious level to be in. And anger and hatred even are higher than that. But, you know, they would be experiencing really deep depression, and they would have no hope at all. And by working on ourselves, we can help to pull those people. Well, according to this hypothesis, I mean, we don't know if it's the right hypothesis or not, but it feels encouraging to me. According to this hypothesis, by working on ourselves, we can actually help to pull those people out of that terrible situation. And this is how it works, because one individual at a higher level of consciousness counterbalances many, many, many individuals who are below. So let's look at some actual figures. At 300, which really is a very simple level to reach, all you really need is non-judgment and to feel some optimism. So certainly everybody in this group would be at least 300 without any need to worry about that. And at 300, one person within the global mind makes up for 90,000 people below 200. So that starts to give you some kind of feeling of how powerful this can be, just to work on your own consciousness. At 400, which again, you know, most of us may well be at the 400 level, that's somebody who can achieve a harmonious attitude, bringing acceptance and forgiveness. It's not a difficult level, really. You can gain an enhanced sense of reason, bringing understanding and meaning to life. And pursuing higher education, which probably most of us have done on some level, any kind of profession. So 400 is very, very achievable. And at that level, we make up for an incredible 400,000 people below the 200 level. At 500, you need to be spiritually conscious, but again, that's achievable for most of us. Some of us may be there already. Unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness becomes alive in their reality. And at that point, one person makes up for 750,000 people. So we're getting on for well, in fact, it is 750,000, isn't it? 750,000 people from one person. And if you can get up to 600, which may be a bit more of a stretch, because we could be looking here at pretty much bliss consciousness, but not unachievable for us, but not necessarily easy. But at that level, we're counterbalancing, one person is counterbalancing 10 million people below the 200 level. So here in the UK, with our population of about 69 million, we would only need 6 people at that level to actually counterbalance our entire country. I mean, to be honest, we've probably got a lot less at lower than 200 than some other parts of the world. But all the same, for that, it suddenly makes everything a little bit more achievable. Here's some other thoughts that some of you may have seen before, and we'll come back to that in a minute. This is why I feel it gives hope for humanity. Just for your information, the definition of an organism is that it must be able to grow, reproduce, respire, respond, digest, i.e. work with nutrition, move and excrete. Okay, so that's the definition of an organism. Believe it or not, every cell in our body does that. So each cell in our body meets the definition of being an organism in its own right. The human body comprises of 38 trillion cells, and yet those 38 trillion cells are able to collectively act as one organism. So even though each of those cells meets the criteria for an organism, we don't have an argument. Well, maybe we do sometimes when we're ill, but for the most part, before we do anything, we don't have to get agreement from all 38 trillion cells in our body. We are able to act as one overall organism in our own right. So when you consider the population of the world is a mere 7.8 billion, a lot less than 38 trillion. So my thinking is, if 38 trillion cells can act collectively in the greater good, then hopefully 7.8 billion is doable. Okay, that's my hope, that one day the human population should be able to act collectively to ensure the survival of our planet.